name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. Good to have you with us. Friday on our program, of course, means Jeff Sentell. We'll talk some UGA recruiting with him. A lot to get to with Jeff. He's had some really good updates here recently at DawgNation.com, so we'll talk about a lot of the big names for the class of 2021. I'm also going to squeeze in a little clip here and there of some of the really good interviews that Jeff has done as of late with some of the recent 2020 signees as well. So it's busy for us on that front. You're going to love what we start with today. Mecole Hardman, the recently minted Super Bowl champion, doing his part to sell the Georgia program and on the recruiting trail. I think this is fun stuff. We'll begin the show that way. Just a lot to kind of get into. A little bit more from Mel Kiper on some of these NFL draft evaluations of the UGA players. We'll kind of cover all of that. Just really glad to have you with us as DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
One of the things that we talked about a little earlier this week is the value of a game that Georgia just scheduled with a team like Clemson, and the fact that, it kind of helps you with your college football playoff argument maybe, and obviously Georgia's goal is to win the national championship. Beating a team like Clemson head-to-head would kind of make that easier, just given the fact that Clemson's been a fixture in the national championship conversation. But I said, parallel to all of that, there's actually something else in college football that's kind of important, and it's got really nothing to do with winning a national championship, or at least it's not primarily about winning a national championship. What I told you earlier this week, and I believe this to be absolutely true, is that at the same time that you're pushing and competing and playing for championships, you're also kind of desiring just to be kind of a relevant part of the relevant conversation. You want to be in the mix, playing the big games, getting your highlights on ESPN. It is possible to be good without being necessarily all that relevant. Whether you think about modern time examples like UCF, which was undefeated a couple of years ago, Clemson for the most part, which is undefeated every year, but really none of their games in the regular season get all that much attention because they're like a 30-point favorite. If you want to go back long-term on this, I can remember, 1984, like BYU won the national championship. They've got a trophy, but for anyone who was alive during that time, you'd be hard-pressed to sort of remember any game they played during that season. It is possible in college football to be good, maybe even be the best team in the country, or in some cases, the only undefeated team, and yet not really be all that relevant because of the lack of big games that you had on your schedule. So you want to be a sort of big-time big-time team playing big-time games. At the same time, you're competing for championships. The reason why I bring that up is because of something that former Georgia wide receiver Mecole Hardman has said. Now, I think it's really interesting the way that Hardman has kind of become one of the most important brand ambassadors for UGA. I guess winning a Super Bowl with the Chiefs will do that. I'm not quite sure I could have predicted to the level to which that Hardman just kind of resonates with kind of the next generation of recruits, with young fans. He's just really good at selling himself and also, by comparison, also selling UGA as well. Georgia, in fact, on its official football Twitter account, recently published an interview, a brief, short interview with Mecole Hardman, and Hardman talks about the ways in which Kirby Smart and the Georgia program prepared him to be in the NFL. Now, he says some of the same stuff you've kind of come to expect here for what Georgia and the rigors of the program provided for him, but he also kind of touches on what I just mentioned at the very start of our program here today, that the sort of big game environment that Georgia seems to always be in, that's a good thing for guys who also dream of playing on Sunday. So with all of that in mind, let me let you hear a little bit from former UGA wide receiver, newly minted Super Bowl champion Mecole Hardman.
When Coach Smart came in and, the program he developed, it definitely prepared you a lot. The preparation we did here is the same way we do it in the league. The hard practices, and especially playing the SEC, it's kind of like a mini NFL, playing in front of big crowds or big games or big situations. So training your mind to be mentally, prepared for things, keyed in on the details, because a lot of the game is mental. What he brought and what he did, he definitely prepared me for sure.
So I always love when we have a little bit of a baseline underneath the words there. It always makes me think maybe we should do that for our full show around here. But the first part of that, what you hear from Mecole, you've come to expect that. Hey, at Georgia, we practice hard, and therefore, when I get to the game, sometimes they're easier. Or when I get to the NFL, I'm not asked to work harder there than I've worked here. All of that is stuff that we've kind of come to expect. But in addition to that, listen to what he says there. He calls the SEC kind of a mini NFL. We've kind of heard that before as well. But I want us to make sure we pay full attention and pay really, really close attention to the ways in which that, as he said, big games, big atmosphere, big situations, that when you move on and go and play in an AFC championship game or Super Bowl or, these tough contests in the AFC West, when you're playing in these games on Sunday in the NFL, Mecole says, that's not a shock for me. That's not something I'm not used to because I've been in, as he said, big games, big situations, at my time at Georgia. And what I love about Kirby Smart, and in some respects, this helps you win a national championship, but in other respects, it might not. Kirby Smart's always seeking out those opportunities to put Georgia in the biggest of situations. College football is, after all, an entertainment product, and it's more entertaining to see your team playing in big games, and to a Kirby's credit, there is a lot of that at Georgia. And as a slight contrast here, we get so used to this that almost we forget how unusual some of this is for other places. I saw a tweet from the Twitter account Pick Six Previews this week talking about how few non-conference games against ranked opponents certain teams have played. I think we have that. Can we show this? So here's a Pick Six Previews on Twitter saying, over the past 15 years, these programs have scheduled the fewest ranked Power 5 opponents. Now, some of these you don't care about, but other of these are fairly big programs. Iowa's played just one. Missouri's played just one. Oklahoma State's played just 3. Penn State has played just 3. Wisconsin has played just 3. There are others, but those are the ones that I'll highlight. Those are teams that sometimes are in the top 25, or in the case of Wisconsin, Penn State, frequently in the top 25, and yet not playing that many top 25 games against non-conference opponents. Over the course of 15 years, to barely ever do that, that's just kind of boring. If you're playing 4 in some of these conference cases, 3 weak non-conference games every year, forget what it says about your overall resume at the end of the season. Just for the experience of a fan, that's as I said before, that's just kind of boring. Nobody wants to do that. You want to be in big games on TV, a part of the relevant conversation. Georgia has luckily been able to do that far more often than others, so I thought that was worth pointing out. By the way, before we shift gears here, one more thing on Mecole. If you were to think just for a moment that Hardman's praise in that officially produced UGA video was just what you're supposed to say when the cameras are on you, doing a solid for the school that you played at, I think you'd be doing Mecole a disservice, because his belief about those kinds of things when it comes to UGA apparently is truly authentic. Let me show you one more thing from him before we move on and talk about something different. There's a basketball recruiting reporter who is writing about Jabari Smith, a recruit who I guess is considering UGA. The honest truth is I don't follow basketball recruiting as well as I do football recruiting. But nonetheless, the recruiting reporter mentioned Smith, and Hardman retweets this and says, LOL, if these big-time recruits would just give UGA a chance, they just don't understand how great it'll be. Great education, and I mean, it's Athens. And he kind of gives you the shrugging emoji. Football and basketball at the top of their game, UGA would be crazy. So I think what you have here with Mecole is a real legitimate fan, a guy that seemed to enjoy his time at UGA and seems to be really proud to have been part of the program and really eager to see more success come from UGA in the years to come, even though Mecole won't be there and be a part of that anymore. The phrase DGD gets thrown around a lot. I think Mecole truly embodies that in every way, form, shape, and fashion. Great to still see him recruiting so hard for the Dogs, and a pretty good way to start our show here on this Friday. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. It's great to have you with us, no matter how you get to us today, live on video, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, on the radio with our friends in Athens at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and as a podcast, all of the major podcast players. We also post the show for you at worldfamousDawgNation.com, and really glad to have you with us. And, of course, we really appreciate Kroger for making it all possible here today. Let me remind you of this. Kroger trying to keep you healthy. You can schedule your free heart health screening at your local Kroger. It includes cholesterol, blood pressure, and BMI. Go to Kroger.com/hearthealth to get started. The website, once again, Kroger.com/hearthealth. We're going to get Jeff Sentell here coming up in just a moment on our program today. Before that, though, here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger, I want to go around the doghouse. And one of the really fun changes to DawgNation over the last couple of weeks has been a brand new format for our weekly recruiting show called Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. It's always been on Wednesdays. Now it's at 6 p.m. You still get as much Jeff Sentell as you've ever gotten before, in fact, even more so, and now you get it at a new time. And one of the things that Jeff had kind of been pushing for to do this show at a new time was his pitch kind of inside the building internally was, hey, if we do this show later, we can get more guests on the show. We can get more big names to kind of pop up and talk about their experience, whether it be the next generation of guys for the 2021 class or some of the guys who are still out there from the 2020 class. We can talk to some of those guys. And Jeff, to his credit, has really put his money where his mouth is as of late, having some big names on the show the last couple of weeks. Now, I would say the best way to catch up with all of these is to probably go to the DawgNation YouTube page. And if you haven't been a subscriber, even if you're a podcast listener, being a DawgNation YouTube subscriber is generally a pretty good thing, because in addition to my show every day, there's also a lot of other interviews, a lot of other content. Our buddy Connor Riley doing a bunch of stuff there. Of course, Mike Griffith as well. Good to be a DawgNation YouTube subscriber. And on the most recent edition of Before the Hedges presented by Kroger, there was a wide-ranging interview with recent Georgia signee Tate Ratledge. Ratledge tells the great story of coming in contact with Herschel Walker and how that kind of coincided with his announced plan to repledge himself to UGA. It's worth hearing from Ratledge on that. But the clip I want to play for you just for a moment. And I don't think you can discount how valuable this ended up being for Georgia and its 2020 class. The chance to bring in Matt Luke on the heels of losing Sam Pittman. We know what kind of relationship builder Pittman was, the work that he did in putting together another elite offensive line class for Georgia, and the jeopardy that group maybe found itself in for a moment once Pittman decided he was going to become Arkansas head coach. But apparently, Matt Luke really swooped in and did a great job right away. In fact, don't take my word for that. Listen to Tate Ratledge here describe to all of you from the interview with Jeff Sentell just how big of an impact that Matt Luke made on him very quickly. This is good stuff from Tate Ratledge.
Great personality. He spent a whole day with me, and I love the guy. Me and him made a better relationship than I have with any other coach that fast.
Did you know that this was a guy you could play for 10 minutes of talking to him, or did you have to see him practice and work the guys?
I knew pretty much right off the bat. Within 30 minutes of conversation, just his personality, just how personable he was with me, like keeping away from football, wanting to get to know me, my family, my friends. That was a big part of it.
I mean, listen, I've said this before. I think that Kirby Smart makes a certain thing look easy that's actually far harder than you realize, and you see this from other SEC teams all the time. There's never going to be quite enough elite assistant coaches to go around, and by elite, I mean guys who have a motor that's running 24 hours a day. Guys who actually want to recruit. If anything, you see in kind of modern times, a lot of these assistants, once they have a chance to go on to the NFL, they do that because they're not asked to recruit there. It's just a different kind of life. And for some guys who just don't want to burn the candle at both ends, maybe the engine doesn't quite rev quite as hard to be able to do that, then in going and being on an NFL staff for them is just better. But there's certain guys who kind of want the ball in their hand with the game on the line. They want the responsibility for bringing in big-time players for a class. Matt Luke's clearly one of those guys. He's just kind of cut out to be a college coach. He may very well be an offensive coordinator or a head coach again very soon. But for now, in that kind of, I guess, rehabilitation stage after not, lasting as Ole Miss head coach, he's down here for Georgia and he's doing good work. Smart getting him hired as quickly as he did, on the job as quickly as he did, winning over a guy like Tate Ratledge again, who had plenty of places he could go. I think that really speaks to the work that Matt Luke has done as a recruiter and the work that Kirby Smart did for bringing a guy like Luke into the program. And you shouldn't discount that when you think about Georgia being set up for success in 2020 and for future years. The quick way in which Smart replaced Pittman, brought in Luke, and the aggressive way with which Luke made a name for himself right away. I think both these guys, Luke and Smart, deserve a lot of credit for this, and frankly, the UGA signees themselves for still being able to see the value that exists in Georgia, even beyond Pittman's departure. I think that guys like Ratledge probably deserve some credit for that as well. Another guy who would echo a similar sentiment is Cedric Von Prine-Granger, who was also on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger like 2 weeks ago. Now, Van Prine's a little different in that apparently, you're going to hear this from him in his own words for a while, he was maybe more sure, I think, of his Georgia pledge than some of the other guys were, maybe a little less willing to reconsider that, even without Sam Pittman being here, according to what he said when he was on the show 2 Wednesdays ago. But he said even once Pittman was gone, there are a couple of weeks when you're kind of wondering, is this really the place for me? And more praise from Matt Luke, from Cedric Von Prine. This from Before the Hedges presented by Kroger 2 weeks ago. Let me let you hear that as well.
What was the moment when you felt like it was 100% locked in concrete that you were going to be a Bulldog?
I'll be honest, at first, once I found out it was Coach Matt Luke, I was back comfortable again because I knew how good of a guy he was. So I'll probably say since August, give or take maybe 1 or 2 weeks.
So I think that's good stuff there from Cedric Von Braun saying that that's where he thought he was going and that's what he was going to be a part of. And we're going to talk later in the show what Mel Kiper said about guys like Solomon Kinley and Andrew Thomas and Isaiah Wilson, these guys who've left the program to kind of move on to the NFL. Georgia having to replace as many of those guys as it's had to for this class is not an easy thing to do. And making sure that you don't lose what has been one of the strengths of your program, not an easy thing to do. So Georgia doing a good job of that over the course of the offseason. And make sure you check out Before the Hedges presented by Kroger from each of the last 2 weeks. You hear the full interview with Tate Ratledge, the full interview with Cedric Von Braun Granger. I thought it was really good stuff and a great job by Jeff Sentell for getting it all done. And now here on DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger, speaking of Jeff Sentell, for more on the current stuff involving the 2021 recruiting class. And one thing in particular we're going to talk to Jeff about, a promise apparently made by a UGA assistant to a current top name in the 2021 class that I think has a pretty good chance of coming true. We'll talk to Jeff about that. Great to have all of you with us here on DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger, and hope you enjoy Jeff Sentell right now.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Well, hello to Jeff Sentell here. Always great to have him on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger, and a lot of really good stuff. I just played you a couple clips from some recent interviews on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. Also some really interesting pieces that have shown up on DawgNation.com as of late, and that's kind of what I want to talk to Jeff about for most of our time here now. Jeff, happy Friday to you, and hope you're doing well.
Hey, Brandon. Happy Friday to you, too, man. And I hope everybody got a chance to see that or hear about that Mecole recruiting pitch on behalf of Georgia.
Yeah, it was a really fun thing to be able to see, and Mecole obviously does a really good job of that. And speaking of recruiting pitches, I wanted to begin with one of your stories this week from DawgNation.com about Mario Williams, the good-looking receiver from the 2021 class. And the thing about that story, Jeff, that jumped out to me, it was maybe more interesting than anything else, is that Todd Monk, and I'm paraphrasing here, according to Williams' own words, has essentially told him, we're ready to get you the ball, we're ready to deliver you some touchdowns, going to get you involved in the offense. And I guess, Jeff, reading this as a fan who would love for a guy like Williams to be at UGA and loves the idea of anybody kind of having the football delivered to them, we've seen receivers and would-be pass catchers kind of talk about those kinds of promises from Georgia before in your stories at DawgNation.com. And to be frank, sometimes those promises rang a little hollow, and sometimes I think the guys on the receiving end of those promises weren't quite sure they believed them. But with a guy like Todd Monken saying that to Williams, isn't there just a much better chance that in this case that pitch actually turns out being true?
Yeah, I think it's a couple things, and I'm glad we were able to bait the hook a little bit there with Mecole, because I think Georgia, look at Ladd McConkey last year, and then now look at Mario Williams in the 2021 class. They want more guys like Mecole, and that means man beaters, one-on-one beaters, contested catch beaters, because I think Georgia and the offensive staff, which remains, have a bad taste in their mouth about certain games last year, the Notre Dame game, the South Carolina game, of course, the LSU game, when they just didn't have the weapons to really move the ball effectively on offense, when the ground game was stymied. And I think it's different now because with a guy like Monken saying it, that's level one. And then Brock Vandegrift is probably level two there for Mario Williams. Brock Vandegrift has been telling Mario Williams that he wants to get him the ball. He wants to play with him, an electric, dynamic. That's the word that keeps coming up with Mario Williams, a dynamic playmaker. Brock Vandegrift has been telling him that since he was committed steadfastly to Oklahoma. So that's a good double barrel right there of what's happening where Mario believes, he's heard it from Brock, he's heard it from now the offensive coordinator, that Georgia's going to throw the ball a lot more, and they're going to get the hands in the hands of their playmakers, especially a playmaker that just evidently, you look at his film, you listen to it, Brandon, he wants to touch the ball, and he thinks he should score the ball every time he touches the ball. He's looking to the end zone, and that's a mentality you can say that's probably not widespread across the Georgia offense.
Yeah, and I guess what I also like about this as well is if the only thing that you're pitching someone on is, hey, we think you've got the speed to run away from defensive backs, and that's going to lead you to have great success, Well, if that be the case, then it doesn't matter where they go. If they've got the speed to run away from guys, then they'll do that in whatever offense they're playing in. They don't get slower playing in someone else's offense. What I think you want to be able to do is say, we've got more ways to get you open than just watching you run past defensive backs. We've got an air of sophistication. We've got an intricacy to our offense that's going to allow you to get even more open in more ways than just running past people. That's what I think that Todd Monken has the opportunity to provide, and frankly, I think that's kind of what's been missing from Georgia, where if you couldn't run past people, then you just weren't open. But football's about more than just speed.
Yeah, Brandon, let me tie two things together because it makes sense with combine and draft time coming up. Here's what I've heard from almost every offensive recruit about Monken and those Georgia Junior Day visits in January, is when Monken flips on the film, he flips on NFL film. He flips on O.J. Howard in Tampa Bay. He flips on Cleveland clips. He flips on Tampa Bay clips. That's what he's showing these young men. And, you know, everybody that's exiting out of Georgia right now and going to the league, they're thankful. They're remorseful for the games they didn't win and the championships they didn't win, because that's going to be an unfulfilled chapter in their college football careers, no doubt about that. But when they came to Georgia, every one of these young men has a dream. It's get me to the next level, develop me and showcase me to the next level. And when they went into school and they signed their name on that LOI, what they were hoping that was on the end of that letter of intent, on the other side of that letter of intent, was a chance to get drafted really high, make a lot of money in professional football, and play on the greatest stage of pro football. And that's what Georgia's doing. Georgia has the near misses in the postseason. Georgia has the SEC East championships in the trophy case. But what they're doing, you see 10 Georgia Bulldogs invited to the scouting combine. Don't believe, you make for certain you can believe that Georgia's going to tout that, all those guys on the stage at the NFL combine next weekend, the 10 Bulldogs there. And what they want to see is Georgia getting guys to the league. That's the number one thing. If Georgia can weather, not beating an Alabama, not beating an LSU, yada, yada, yada. But as long as that pipeline to the NFL remains strong and remains vital, which are getting guys to the league as an NFL developer of talent, that's as good as anybody in college football.
So James Williams, the five-star safety, has named Georgia as part of his top 3. That's not really a surprise. We did have some fun on our program a little earlier this week with the fact that it's another elite recruit from the Sunshine State, not paying the Gators any attention whatsoever. But beyond that, what can you tell us about the relationship between Georgia and Williams and kind of how this, I think, very impressive defensive playmaker plays into the plans for Georgia's 2021 class?
Yeah, so Brandon, he's a guy that he's probably going to be the Keely Ringo of the Hedges top targets for the 2021 class. That's going to be the guy that sits at number 1 until he makes his decision. I thought it was too interesting on two fronts, because I know you found a way to kind of chide and see a way to poke fun at the Gators there, but the biggest miss for a Florida school regarding the James Williams top 3 was the Miami Hurricanes.
Yeah.
Because that's the one that's played the Ed Reed card really hard, really strong. Being an ex-great safety that had creative edits. Ed Reed is actually now a personnel director, a director of football ops for the Miami football program now under Manny Diaz. And yet he chooses a top 3, which doesn't include those Gators, but also doesn't include the Hurricanes. It's a Clemson, Georgia, Alabama top 3. And for James Williams, we can write about him, we've talked about him a lot, but this is a guy that's closing in on 6'5", that plays like a 6'2" safety with all the ball hawking skills. He's a great leader. He's a physical player. He comes out of that South Florida area, and it seems lately that the only school that's getting him on campus is the University of Georgia. He was back for a junior day. That's one of those guys, what's happening out in the world and the quotes that are being recycled, and James Williams talks about when he wants to decide. He gives hints that it might be later on in the cycle, but nonetheless, that's a guy that there are just not a lot of people in college football. There's not a lot of people even on the Georgia roster at that position with that size. And oh yeah, he's the number 1 safety in the country and the number 5 overall prospect for 2021.
Got more questions with Jeff Sentell coming up. I do want to remind you to check out DawgNation.com today, though. When you go up there, one of the things you're going to see on the homepage is a really fun link to a great thing the Atlanta Braves are doing. I love this time of year because it's the start of spring training. I'm always busy. I don't usually get to travel to where the Braves are now in Northport to see spring training, but they're helping you do the next best thing. If you can't be with the Braves in their brand new facility there at Northport, they're doing a Behind the Braves 5-part documentary to give you an idea of what spring training looks like. Not just from the outside looking in, but kind of from the inside. It's a lot like Hard Knocks for the NFL or something like that. The first one debuted last night on YouTube. I actually got a chance to see this, and it's really fun. A really deep look at Will Smith as he gets ready to begin his Braves career. The video work on this is just outstanding. The bats have never sounded better when they're smacking the balls, and the new ballparks never look better. This is just an incredible way to kind of get acquainted with the Braves going to be like for 2020. Watch some of the new Braves, get acquainted with their new teammates. Go to this website, youtube.com/Braves. It's youtube.com/Braves. This was a really fun debut documentary last night. I didn't realize this, but I guess the Braves are the first team to ever really do anything like this. And if you've watched, as I said before, Hard Knocks for the NFL or something like that, this is like the version of that for the Atlanta Braves. I was thoroughly entertained by this. It's youtube.com/Braves for Behind the Braves, the spring training documentary. Of course, Atlanta Braves baseball is for the A. All right, Jeff, let me get back to a little bit of recruiting talk here. I think the Brock Bowers story is pretty interesting, and to me, what this reminds me of, this tight end from out west. We've talked a lot on this show this week about the ways in which, 5-star prospects are leaving home more so than ever before, and a lot of those cases are guys like, Kendall Milton, who was a 5-star, Keely Ringo, who's obviously in that category. A lot of those West Coast guys kind of coming this way. Is Bowers one way or another going to be the next guy in that line, with Stanford kind of not what it once was, the LA schools, UCLA and USC, not doing big things right now? Is this another good-looking prospect from the Golden State who's going to end up going somewhere else, whether it be Georgia or not, to play his college ball?
Well, I think Oregon's a school to think about there as well. You're right. The sense there is it's not, will he stay in California? It will be which school outside the region of California will get Brock Bowers. Brock took a heck of a jump. It was evident by looking at his junior film. He took a heck of a jump from probably 225 overall, 155 overall in the composite, all the way up to the nation's number 2 tight end, number 71 overall in the country, 6'3", 225 now. He runs a 4.55 laser. I think it was a sick stat, Brandon, that you look through his numbers and you find out that he made 14 touchdown catches last year out of 39 total catches. He only caught the ball 39 times, and yet he had over 1,000 yards. That was 28 yards per reception. When I saw those numbers and I was talking to Brock, I'm like, Brock, do you guys have like 7th graders playing football out there in Napa or something? Is everybody else busy doing other things? I mean, he's just a unique athlete. One of the guys that had an interesting thing where, Brandon, he went from an 0-10 season and went to an opening camp with just one Nevada offer, and then ran a 4.55 laser and a 40-inch vertical leap, and had just a Nevada offer. And then shortly after that, everybody started trickling in. He took a visit to Georgia. I think the synergy there for Georgia fans is he wanted to take an East Coast swing. That was LSU, Clemson, and Georgia. He's got a Midwestern swing coming up with Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. But when he was down south, he went to go see LSU, and the whole Tiger staff was at the Oval Office for the White House with the national championship ceremony with President Trump. And then he went to go visit Clemson, and he got some time with Clemson, but then Clemson picked up a commitment as his position basically 24 to 36 hours later, and Brock believes that Clemson's only taking one tight end this cycle. Oh, but when he was visiting with Georgia, he got to watch film with Monken. He got to talk to Kirby Smart. He got to watch some of those Tampa Bay Buccaneer clips and how Monken featured the tight end in that offense. So that was definitely a win for Georgia in that head-to-head in terms of exposure on his junior day visit. Brandon, there's a lot of things. You look at Brock Bowers. Some folks on our DawgNation forum check him out, and they feel that, okay, this is a kind of a versatile, more athletic Charlie Warner type. There's other guys on the tight end list as well. There's another young man from Nevada, Brandon, Moliki Matabau, who's the nation's number 4 tight end, 6'6" with athleticism. That's who the DawgNation Forum folk are pointing to this morning. That's the guy that they really would like to see in a Georgia uniform. Another 6'6" tight end and upwards from Nevada. Another name that really strikes me as a name to think about for the tight end spot is a really athletic young man out of Savannah, Tennessee. That's Hudson Wolf. He's another 6'6" tight end, Brandon. Another top 10 tight end in the country, and he's visited Georgia a couple times as well. It seems like Georgia's tight end position is still going to get maybe a little bit more athletic while trying to retain a lot of that size. And you think about getting the ball in somebody's hands and watching him make a play, Brock Bowers is certainly a candidate to do that.
So I was looking at the story of Dallas Turner, which is kind of an interesting story in its own right. DawgNation.com is where folks can read it. I guess one of the key notes there is, if I have my information right, he's leaving American Heritage and Plantation and going to St. Thomas Aquinas, I believe, if I've got that right, which your story kind of details a bit. But also he wants to be a baker. And Jeff, I don't know if you know this, but I used to live in Swanee, and there was an NFL guy who had a bakery in Swanee. I think it was Chauncey Davis, who was with the Falcons for a little bit, played for the Bears for a little while, and he had a bakery in Swanee. So we have had NFL guys who have also been bakers, I guess, in their moonlighting trade as well. So if Dallas Turner goes along the way to doing that, I guess he would not be the first one to do that.
Yeah, I always trying to find something interesting about it. He called it like a hustle, Brandon. That's like other guys mow lawns or whatever to make money. Well, he bakes, and no one taught him that. He didn't have a great aunt or grandma or a mom. He just said, this is what I'm going to do, and he starts reading labels off the back of the box. And that's a unique thing to look at for a young man that had 15 sacks last year in South Florida, playing for American Heritage. That's quite a prestigious program down there in South Florida. He was named the Broward County Defensive Player of the Year. Alabama's in the mix there, but it seems like Georgia and Florida are the ones that are really vying for Dallas Turner services. He was glowing after his Georgia visit. He said it was the best one he's been on so far. He made that comment in that copy where he was talking about Georgia just has them dogs, and he was accentuating the Athens, Georgia dialect of dogs. He's a guy that Dan Lenning has been recruiting for some time, and has already a special vibe there, special feeling there about the University of Georgia. And kind of a key indicator is Georgia needs to go for about 2 or 3 outside linebackers in this class, considering Azeez Ojulari, Adam Anderson, Nolan Smith, and their time in Georgia, how much longer those guys might have beyond the 2021 season. So, the outside linebacker position is very interesting because you got Quentin Somerville in there as well. That's the young man from Arizona. Georgia kind of left the inside linebacker, outside linebacker position alone, except for Mecole Sherman in the 2020 class. So that means they'll have to double down and go hard looking for the top-notch talent among the rising seniors right now in 2021. And there's already a lot of really good names to look at there.
When it comes to Dallas Turner and his baking skills, can I give you just a little bit of a tip, Jeff? Based on what happened to former Auburn lineman Greg Robinson this week, it's a lot better to be someone who bakes than someone who gets baked, if you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's definitely right. You want to look at that story and put that emoji to your chin a little bit. It kind of reminds you of the Nate Newton story from a while back, Brandon. You remember that one when Nate Newton was caught with, I think, 300 pounds of that stuff, or even more market value than these charges that are kind of levied there with Greg Robinson and that I guess that little travel excursion. With everything that's going on. But I guess you'd probably also rather have your players baking cakes and thinking about red velvet cake, confetti cake, their brownies, their cream cheese pound cake, rather than all these other endeavors with their off-season pursuits.
Yeah, no doubt about that. On a very, very different note to close out our conversation, you got a good thing coming up with Tony Grimes here. 5-star cornerback. Jeff, I like 5-star cornerbacks. I like for Georgia to get as many as they can. You've had a chance to talk to Grimes as of late. We saw some of this on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger on Wednesday. We're going to read more of this coming up this weekend at DawgNation.com, or maybe even today for all I know. What can you tell us about Georgia and Grimes right now?
So Georgia and Grimes, this is one of those that might catch your ear a little bit, Brandon, because there was a little bit of, a cold shoulder in terms with Georgia and Grimes, and maybe when the offer came and when he was offered. So it was. I remember him telling us at the Future 50 he was like, folks, that Georgia visit better go great, or they're going to have a hard time sticking with all these other contenders on my list. Well, he gets down to Georgia. I guess he would just breathe in the Clark County air. He would look around the facilities. He would see the attention that's coming his way from Georgia. And he really liked all of it, Brennan. It was one of those kind of drop the mic visits a little bit where Georgia not only didn't get bumped off the top 8, top 9 zone, but it moved up into the already going to get an official visit zone. The family, his father, Deion Glover, and Tony Grimes, when you guys read that piece, it's going to be very glowing commentary about what's going on in Athens and the potential future for them there at the University of Georgia. Got a great human side to Tony Grimes' story as well that kind of identifies him more than just a 5-star and a nation's #1 cornerback for the 2021 cycle. He's about 6'1", 180 pounds. Brandon, sooner or later, this is going to get confusing for you. Should Georgia end up sealing the deal and getting a signature from Grimes, you're going to have to start figuring out which one of the nation's #1 cornerbacks in the defensive backfield for Georgia that you think is playing better at the current time.
I know. Listen, that's a nice thing to think about. And listen, I hate to be overconfident here, but from the standpoint of a Georgia fan, the idea that Georgia wouldn't eventually impress and eventually work its way back in with an elite defensive back, we've seen this play out a million times before. The idea that an elite defensive back is going to view Georgia as a place they don't want to be. We have too many counterexamples to think that was ever going to really happen with Georgia and Grimes, do we not?
Yeah, and everybody mentions a couple things. They mentioned they like the fact that Kirby Smart was a former DB, but the fact that he was a former DB at Georgia and how he's now the head coach with a little bit of Alabama championship resume sprinkled all in there. It seems like the perfect combination, especially with the way Georgia trains up DBs. They've got a Thorpe Award winner to trumpet. They've got more guys coming through the pipeline. They've got a DB class, not this year, but folks, that's why this recruiting for the defensive back spot is so important for this cycle. Because if you look at Georgia's secondary right now, you can say, okay, Richard LeCounte, third, going to exhaust his eligibility, probably be a day 1 or day 2 draft pick in the NFL after he does. You've got Mark Webb Jr. also going to run out of eligibility. That's the star-type fit there for Georgia in the nickel and dime packages. And you've got DJ Daniel. He was a junior college player who plugged and played very.
That's about right.
And then you've got not just DJ Daniel, but you got Eric Stokes, you got Tyson Campbell, you got a lot of names right there that could eventually be moving on to the NFL. So that's why Georgia needs to go back and double down and get a lot more cornerbacks in this cycle. Could end up with probably, Brandon, I know you're going to hate to hear me say this, but they could end up with 2, maybe 3 of the top 10 corners in the country when it's all said and done.
Boy, that'd be I was going to be sarcastic and say that'd be a terrible thing for Georgia. Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun. Let me ask you a really dumb thing on the way out the door. This Deion Glover, Grimes' father, this isn't the same former Hawk, Yellow Jacket, and Cedar Grove Saint basketball player, is it?
Oh, you'd love that if it was, because it would have some Georgia Tech connotations to it. But no,
okay.
No, this is not the same guy. This is just a coincidence.
All right, thank you very much, Jeff. Thanks for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. We'll look forward to reading you a lot here in the days ahead, and of course, having you back on our program again very soon as well.
All right, BA. Everybody have a good weekend. Hope we don't have everybody hungry for cake now after our conversation.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
You start to feel kind of old here now, and a lot of these guys that you did watch growing up, they do have sons kind of on the recruiting trail now, and so when you hear a name that you kind of recognize, you're like, maybe that is the same one, but in this case, no, it's not quite the same one there. Good stuff from Jeff Sentell, as always, and as I said before, make sure you're watching Before the Hedge is presented by Kroger every Wednesday, new time, 6 p.m., to stay up to date on UGA recruiting. Let's go cruise around the SEC right now with our friends at Royal Caribbean, and one of the best things about a Royal Caribbean cruise ship is the entertainment you get on the ship. It's the most awarded cruise ship in the industry when it comes to these kind of dazzling full-scale productions. I'm talking about like Broadway, Tony Award style musicals like Cats and Mamma Mia and Grease and Hairspray. Get the ice skating shows on the Oasis class ships. You have those aqua theater shows, which is pretty amazing when you think about it. You're watching a video, you see that right now. Like the Olympic style diving into the deepest pool at sea. They make it look so easy because they do it while the ship is moving, but it's not as easy as they make it look. In addition to that, you got like the nightclubs and like the live music venues and everything else. As I said before, Royal Caribbean once again awarded Best Entertainment by Travel Weekly's Reader's Choice Awards, and that's one of the reasons why vacation there on a Royal Caribbean ship is so much fun. So contact your travel advisor or reach out to our friends at the Cruise and Vacation Authority. Call them at 800-326-4971. That's 800-326-4971. That'll get you in touch with the Cruise and Vacation Authority. So slightly Georgia-centric news here as a part of our SEC through as we cruise around the SEC with Royal Caribbean. Sam Pittman has hired former UGA offensive lineman and current UGA staffer Fernando Velasco away to an improved title and I'm sure improved salary with his program there at Arkansas. This is obviously, for some Georgia fans, if you're watching a video, you see the nice thank you note from Velasco on Twitter about this. Anytime you lose, kind of what has been a key staffer, and for the elite program, support staff are very important. Georgia's done well at kind of filling out those ranks. You're always like, what does this mean for me, my team, to lose a staffer like this? But you can't have like a scarcity mindset about this. You've got to be willing to pat guys in the back, wish them well as they advance to their career. Because you want to treat your coaches and your staffers the same way you treat your players. You want them to move on to the NFL because it keeps the pipeline of elite guys following in their footsteps. It's the same thing with staffers. You want guys to come to Georgia and then leave for better jobs, even former, UGA players like Velasco, because they go get more experience. Who's to say that at some point in time Velasco's not back working at Georgia again? And when you see the way that Kirby Smart's coattails, that his coaching tree, so to speak, leads to promotions and better jobs and everything else, that just keeps the next crop of young, hungry, upwardly, mobily minded guys wanting to be UGA. So Velasco leaving, I'm not glad he's gone, but this kind of professional development and promotion is a good thing for Georgia, even though if it's not quite as much fun not to have Fernando in the fold anymore. So just my 2 cents on that. Speaking of my opinion, I'll give you my opinion on this next story. So Chris Lowe is reporting at ESPN.com that Steve Sarkisian is staying in Alabama after having his name floated out there for the job for a long time, interviewing for the job. Now, all of a sudden, cooler heads have prevailed, and Sarkisian's decided that Alabama is the place that he wants to be. Some people are going to report this as, well, it's another example of the Pac-12 not being able to pony up financially to get a head coach, that all of a sudden Alabama OC is a better job than Colorado head coach. And for all I know, that may very well be the case. It seems a little weird timing-wise that if Sarkisian was going to stay at Alabama, why go through the motion of actually going through with the interview only to then decide you're going to stay at Alabama? Maybe it was all financially related. Maybe Colorado's going to go in a different direction with this job, and ESPN, who is quite cozy with Alabama, has given them a fairly cozy description of Sarkisian's situation to make it seem like a flex on Alabama's part as opposed to some sort of alternative. It's also fair to say that I'm seeing reports as well that Kansas City Chiefs offensive coordinator and former Colorado Buff Eric Bieniemy has also removed his name from consideration. So it could very well be that Colorado's already decided the coach it wants to hire here. But winner gets to write the history. Alabama's won plenty, and therefore they get to tell the story how they want to. And according to them, their sources, Alabama has flexed its muscles and kept its offensive coordinator. So if you believe the folks in Tuscaloosa, a big win here today. Speaking of Alabama, former Tennessee head coach Butch Jones has a new title there. At one point in time, he was, I guess, intern. Now he is it special assistant to the head coach? Is that the name? Which, obviously, if you've ever watched The Office, brings to mind, I know I'm like the 8th millionth person to make this joke, but brings to mind Dwight Schrute and his assistant to the general manager. How much longer before Butch Jones goes around telling people that he's assistant head coach at Alabama as opposed to what he really is, special assistant to the head coach? It's a fine line between drawing up a game plan and getting coffee. Somehow, special assistant to the head coach sort of feels like you're handling the catering order for the lunch more so than any kind of intricate game planning. But Butch Jones apparently has a big new title there with the Crimson Tide. One more story here as we're cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Ole Miss has had put a late addition to its 2020 class together. Mark Britt, a 4-star athlete, former Florida commit, has apparently decided to go to Ole Miss instead. The Florida fans are treating this as a processed situation, that there wasn't room for Britt at the Florida program. I have zero idea one way or another, but I'll treat this as an Ole Miss story, a late addition from a guy good enough to initially earn a Florida offer. That's probably not a bad thing for Lane Kiffin and the Rebels, and we'll make that your SEC see-through. All right, let me do this here as well, as we just got done cruising around the SEC with our friends at Royal Caribbean. Let me get back to Georgia here for a moment. Early in the show, we kind of talked about some of the new-coming offensive linemen to UGA. Tate Ratledge on his way, Cedric Von Prant on his way. One of the things that makes some room for them at Georgia is the fact that you got guys like Andrew Thomas who chose to leave, Isaiah Wilson who chose to leave, Solomon Kinley on his way out the door. Our buddy Mike Griffith caught up with Mel Kiper, the NFL draft expert from ESPN this week, and talked about a number of those names, DeAndre Swift included. Now, admittedly, we tried to play some Kiper audio yesterday, and it was a little bit wonky. Hopefully this goes better. I wanted you to get a chance to hear this. Good stuff from Kiper on kind of those Georgia guys who could be going to the NFL draft. Here's the guy you've seen on TV with the slick back hair a million times, talking about some UGA names, courtesy of our buddy Mike Griffith.
Kinley, I have a third, fourth round grade one. Wilson, I have a fourth round grade one. I thought he should have gone back. I thought Wilson, I would have gone back to Georgia. But Swift, I have going to Miami at 26. He's still the number one running back because he's more complete than the other two in terms of running, catching, and blocking. Particularly catching out of the backfield. He's been more reliable in terms of not fumbling the football. So that's why I used the first running back off the board. I think right around where we saw Josh Jacobs go last year. So I have a 26 to Miami. I have Andrew Thomas at 18 to Miami. I both actually Georgia Bulldogs going to the Dolphins. So Thomas, like I said before, he's still not where he needs to be. He's not a finished product. And at 18, he will be a developmental left tackle. And Swift will be an immediate starter at running back.
So interesting stuff there. He has both Andrew Thomas and DeAndre Swift ending up at the Miami Dolphins as first-round picks, and you hear there, kind of in no uncertain terms, Isaiah Wilson, Kiper says, should have stayed at Georgia, that apparently in terms at least the high end of the NFL draft, Kiper doesn't view Wilson as being ready. And I've told the guys off the air that this week that I'm not really quite sure what you do with that, because sometimes I think coaches, I'll cite Nick Saban as an example of this, I think the way in which they talk about players moving on to the draft can sound incredibly self-serving. We've heard Saban say, well, if you're not a first-round pick, you shouldn't even go to the draft. That may be true for certain people in certain situations if you can come back and work your way to the first round. But if that's not really an option for a certain player, given his position or given his other circumstances, to say that you should only leave school early to be a first-round pick, that's not always the best advice overall. And I want guys, as I said before with Fernando Velasco, I want guys to feel free to move on with their career and kind of move on to the next level so you can bring in elite recruits behind them. And yet if a guy really has made a bad decision, which certainly Kiper is insinuating right there, then you'd love for somebody to be able to step in and give him some usable advice. I think the tough thing about moving from college to the NFL is always going to be this. Everyone who tells you anything has a vested interest in your decision one way or another. And sometimes it's easy to get somebody to believe something when you think that there's the idea of money on the other end. I think players, when they get ready to move on to the NFL draft, have to be very careful what the advice that they listen to, the people they choose to trust. That is a tough time to make that transition. And the amount of information, some of it false information that players may be hearing, I think only complicates that matter even further. All right, let me do this. We enjoy doing this on our program each and every Friday. The same way that Kroger gets you ready for your weekend at home and gets us ready to kick off the weekend with some big-time UGA athletics. A lot of teams involved here this weekend. Let me highlight some of that for you as part of our Kroger kickoff. Of course, Diamond Dogs at home once again this weekend against Santa Clara. Check your local listings, as they like to say on TV for this. I think the game today is early now. I think it's at 3 p.m., I believe. You can check out GeorgiaDogs.com on that. I believe the Saturday's a doubleheader, so a little bit different timing for the Santa Clara games. Make sure you check that out. Diamond Dogs at Kentucky tonight. Men's basketball at that weird gym in Nashville against Vanderbilt tomorrow. Softball this weekend against Central Michigan and James Madison. The Dukes of James Madison, I believe, are ranked. Swimming and diving is the SEC championships all weekend long there as well. So make sure you check all of that out. Kroger kickoff. And by the way, speaking of our friends at Kroger, they've got some great stuff going on for you right now as well. 3 days worth of digital deals. You can start saving next Wednesday. That's February 26th. You can download the coupons on the Kroger app or Kroger.com, and then get ready to go for the rest of the weekend on Lay's Party Chips, smoked sausage. You can redeem those in store Friday, February 28th through March 1st at your local Kroger. By the way, speaking of Friday, February 28th, that's a week from today, I hope you'll come by and see us at the Atlanta International Auto Show at the Georgia World Congress Center. We're going to be there. We'll do the show at 10 a.m. I'll be there for you when the doors open. We're also going to do Atlanta Falcons News Now with our friends at the AJC and Miller Lite. After that at 1 p.m. All kinds of manufacturers, all kinds of cars, all kinds of fun stuff. It's a week from today at the Atlanta International Auto Show at the Georgia World Congress Center. Go to GoAutoShow.com. You can find out more details about that. It's Go Auto Show. That's the website you can get in touch with. Around here, we love closing the week off on a great note. Hope you're all getting ready for a terrific weekend. Let me see if I can send you out in style here by reminding you with our Gator Hater Updater, now been 1,210 days since those lousy, stinking Gators have beaten the Georgia Bulldogs. You love to see that. We appreciate you being here with us today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. And as I said before, hope you all have a great weekend. And on video. Time now for R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Good to have you with us. Got the comments ready to go here. We'll kind of dive through here. We'll do about 10 strong minutes. We've had some really good comments as of late. I'll go Facebook first. We'll go YouTube after that. And we will just sort of have a good time on a really fun Friday here today. Hope you enjoyed the show. We tried to do our best for you. All right. Over here on this for a minute. Somebody said Sark to the Falcons. I think the Falcons have already had Sark, and I don't think they liked it too much. Robert Barnes says about Mel Kiper that it's been one man's opinion about the draft, meaning Kiper's. He's been wrong as much as he's been right. That's probably true. I would also say that one of the things I think is fascinating with the NFL draft is even the people who do it for a living are, to use Robert's phrase, are wrong about as frequently as they're right. You'll be hard-pressed to find a personnel person who's been in place for a long time who has a batting average of much better than 50%. Your chances of picking a good player are about as, I guess, likely as your chances of picking the winning team in a game between two opponents. It's about as often as chance would dictate. In fact, if you look at the long haul, there's been some fascinating research about this, that the number one overall pick in the NFL draft pops, really hits and produces about as frequently as the number 17 pick does. There's really kind of a gap of performance where you have like the first half of the draft, for the most part, all perform about the same rate. And then, you can kind of divide the draft performances from some of the other picks after that. But it's not quite as distinguished as first-round picks are all in one category, second-round picks are all in another category. It's not quite as distinguished as that. The true elite picks, for the most part, all come 1 through 17. It's a little easier to pick a good player there. And then after that, it's a little bit different. But really, no personnel person's really batting much more than about 50%. That's why you want to get as many draft picks as you can if you're an NFL team, just to give you more chances to succeed. Jimmy Vowell, thanks for the kind words. I really appreciate that. Stacy Mack says, late to the party. I'm just glad you're here when you when you could be. Bob Garrison says, do I have anything on a kicker? I guess my eyes are on Jared Zirkle right now. I know Jeff's written a good piece with Zirkle recently at DawgNation.com. That, to me, looks like the potential heir apparent to Rodrigo Blankenship right now. Ooh, this is interesting. Santiago Diarn says, are you working on a Dog Nation invasion at Brave Stadium? We need to see you throw out the first pitch. Now, I'd love to throw out the first pitch. I don't know that I'm ever going to get a chance to do that. But as far as a Dog Nation invasion goes, so to speak, to a Braves game at Truist Park, let me just say you never know. You just never know. So, Santiago, stay tuned for more on that. We have had some very fun and interesting conversations about some of that kind of stuff. Kevin West says, with Vandergriff in the fold, it seems people are forgetting about Carson Beck. I don't think that anyone's forgetting about Carson Beck. I just think that you are putting a bunch of guys into a competition there, and Beck certainly got – I'll say the same thing about Beck that I said about Kendall Milton. If you go back and look when Kendall Milton initially pledged to Georgia, for like 3 solid days, the entire scroll of stories at DawgNation.com are all about Kendall Milton. Milton has been one of the most covered recruits in the history of Dog Nation. Beck, when he first made his pledge to Georgia, was about the same way. The news cycle for every recruit is pretty similar, that after a few months, there is just a new recruit to talk about. And that's not anything other than just sort of natural human nature, that you just kind of move on to the next name. For now, Vandergriff is that guy. Admittedly, I do think the higher-rated recruit, even if he's a year younger, will be the favorite in that competition. That doesn't mean that the experience that a guy like Brock, a guy like Beck, boy, that's going to get confusing for me. A guy like Beck, what he has by being on campus for a year, that doesn't mean he can't use that to his advantage, end up winning that competition. He certainly could. But admittedly, and from my eyes, the higher rated recruit will be the favorite there. This is a good idea from Joe Moody. And the Astros are coming to Atlanta this year. He says, what if the Braves broke out the black uniforms against the Astros and go like 1919 Black Sox cheating scandal flashback? That's a terrific idea. A terrific idea. I am here for that. Yeah, this is not a baseball show, so we won't talk much about this, but I'm really fascinated to see what the reaction to Houston is as they travel around Major League Baseball this year. I mean, this thing has really grown. It's one of the few things that the controversy seems to keep getting bigger, and the fan response to it, player response to it, seems to be intensifying. Most of these like hot topic things, over the course of time, they just fizzle out. The brightest fires burn out the quickest. And oftentimes these things just these big stories that ESPN's kind of hounding you with every single day, they just kind of wear out after a while. If anything, the attention the Astros scandal is getting bigger and bigger and bigger over time. And I think this is a real thing. I'm seeing lots of reports about how little league teams won't let teams in their league be the Astros anymore and things like that. So this is a real deal. I think you're right. Travis Baltziger says, ready to see some of our defensive linemen get drafted so we can get who we want there. I mean, I would say that Georgia is recruiting well from a defensive line standpoint, but I totally agree with you, Travis, that when you look at what Clemson's done, certainly what Ohio State has done, there are programs who have a better defensive line reputation, and the NFL draft prospects have really aided that, and Georgia does need to join that group. I think it's on its way, but I believe it's something that needs to happen. I think you're right about that. Devin Glenn, on the subject of 2020 wide receivers, says he thinks that Burton is the better of the group and will be ready from day one. Could be very well true. Could very well be true. Green Soldier says, what wide receiver will develop the most under Todd Monken's offense? I can see someone like Jackson making a bigger impact than some are predicting. Obviously, I think that Karras is a good example of that, but because D-Rob has had success before, because he's got some speed, he kind of feels like one of the guys that Monken might have worked with at one of his stops prior to this. That's a guy that I would think would have a chance of the current crop to maybe perform better in the new offense than he did in the old offense. I don't think that Karras is necessarily a bad answer on that, but D-Rob's the first answer that comes to mind for me. Cool Breeze JP says the Astros situation ain't going away anytime soon. No, I don't believe it is either. Chime Dog calling him Butch Schrute. Yeah, that nickname may stick, by the way. Special assistant to the head coach. I think that's really funny. He says he runs Saban's beet farm. Yeah, I could see all of that. Dennis Wilson says, let's talk about week 3. What is it, Alabama for Georgia? Listen, we're ready for it around here. I think we've talked about that game a little bit in some of our meetings just about every day for the last little bit. So you better believe DawgNation already has its chin strap buckled for that one. Who's Miami playing week 3, Dennis? I wonder. Anikmi Udoko, and I hope I pronounced that correctly, shouting out some of these big receivers, Burton and Arian Smith and Marcus Roseman. They're going to be a lot of fun. Don't forget about Justin Robinson in that group, too. Drew Thunke says, let's talk about the Florida game. I'm always up for that as well. Always up for that. As I said off the top of the show, I love these big games you get to play in. Season opener in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. A couple weeks after that, you're playing, Alabama. A couple weeks after that, you're playing Auburn. A couple weeks after that, you're playing Florida. Tennessee in November. That's fun right there. That's what you want to do. Dog 57, I appreciate the kind words. He says, any chance we'd ever do something like that again? Listen, I'm always open to anything. The issue with our buddy Mike Johnson is he's a busy man. Getting schedules to line up sometimes not always the easiest thing to do, but I'm always open to anything. And we've done some stuff, since then, and I'm sure we'll do some more stuff. But Mike's a pretty busy guy these days. A couple more we got to go. Let me try Facebook. Cody Taylor says everyone's sleeping on Keely Ringo. Man, this kid's going to be off the charts great. Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest challenge for Ringo in year one is, and one of the reasons why you probably don't see Keely show up on the breakout freshman list, and we'll all have our own breakout freshman list content over the course of time. The reason why you don't see Ringo on a name like that quite as much is because the secondary is just deeper. Smart said last year that they were better defensively because of the experience in the secondary. Well, if that was true then, now I realize there's no J.R. Reed anymore. But if that was true then, think about the guys who had some experience who are a year older now. Tyson Campbell when he's healthy. DJ Daniel, who really played a lot and I thought played pretty well near the end of the season. Obviously, Richard LeCounte's a senior now. Eric Stokes, a more seasoned player than he once was. That's a tough secondary to crack. I think that Ringo is, from a prospect standpoint, as dazzling as anybody that Georgia has. But the secondary is a little bit of it's just a tough lineup to crack right now. J.D. Hall says, has Kirby filled all the coaching positions? No, there's that one spot still open. And I reckon I don't know when we're ever going to hear anything about that. I'm not quite sure. Gregory Nowak likes hearing from John Stinchcomb. I'm glad to be able to hear that. Yeah, John does a great job. Joel Moody says Dogs will have 5 future NFL players in the secondary this season. I don't think that's too bold of a statement. I don't think that's too bold of a statement at all. Mark Brantley says Jalen Carter's the freshman he's the most excited about. That is a very, very legit name. A legit name for that discussion. Cool Breeze JP says, this season for me is mainly seeing what Monk and Newman do with this new offense, and I think you're right about that, Cool Breeze, as well. Devin Glenn says we're elite on defense at every spot. I want to see that pass rush improve, Devin. I do. Now, do you have the horses to improve it? Obviously, it would appear that you do. You can't say enough about the talents of Nolan and Jermaine Johnson and Azeez Ojulari. But I do want to see those numbers improve just a bit. I do. Bama Boy going at it with somebody. Green Soldier talking about those inside linebackers. Yeah, year 2 of Nakobe Dean could be really fun. And the fact that Monty Rice came back, and I've played you audio from Monty before. I love talking to Monty. I think he's a really sharp guy. I think you're going to love, in his final year at Georgia, I think you're going to love his leadership as much as you love anything from him on the field. And that's saying a lot because he does a lot for you on the field. He's a great run-stopping linebacker, but I think you're going to like him a lot on the field. Robert Barnes says Kirby's being quiet these days. Yeah, this is the time of year where Kirby likes to be pretty quiet. You don't hear a ton from him. And, I guess I'm curious. I mean, it's certainly not too early, to still name an assistant coach, but you almost wondered, March 17th, has Georgia named its coach by then? I wonder about that. It's a really good question. All right, we're going to get ready to wrap things up here on this Friday. By the way, make sure you check out the AJC for AJC.com, Atlanta News Now. Just stay up to date on everything happening in the world. I mentioned before some draft stuff. Falcons getting ready for the NFL draft. NFL Combine coming up. Good coverage of that at AJC.com. Also, a look back. We mentioned the Braves earlier. The 1995 World Champions, the World Series champs, the Atlanta Braves. Great look back on that. And a lot of things to do in the Atlanta area this upcoming weekend. The AJC always kind of helps you plan your weekend and do some really fun stuff. Get out and about and enjoy really living one of the greatest cities in the world. For those of us lucky enough to call Atlanta home, check that out at AJC.com. Also, huge thanks to R.S. Andrews for making the R.S. Andrews cool down possible. Story after story, they've been delivering smiles. It's really cold last night, this morning. If your heating system wasn't working the way that it should, or if it's something about it just sort of makes you nervous, you need that $99 Mega Furnace Safety Check from my friends at R.S. Andrews. You're going to find them online at rsandrews.com, and they will get your system back to factory fresh specs and take really good care of you. It's just $99, but you've got to find them online at rsandrews.com. You'll have a great day, great weekend. I'll see you back here Monday for another edition of DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger.
For more DawgNation videos, check out youtube.com/DawgNation.